So the show itself actually started with, I think at the time I proposed a show for Deluge, and Deborah was sort of interested perhaps. I'd worked with Tyler before, but we've never exhibited before, and the idea was maybe there would be some sort of interface with our work. One of the interesting things is that he's very, very methodical and very involved with planning, so that sometimes the execution of his work is really something that only happens at the very end, which is the case with this work, where the materials weren't even assembled until about a week before the show, and the whole thing was built on site. Whereas in my case, it's a really, really slow process. It's hard for me sometimes to predict where the work is actually going to go once it's started. I frequently feel like I'm negotiating with uncertainty. So when I first had proposed a show, the work I was making was certainly different in character than this work. This work is more colorful, it's more physical, and it's larger. So there were a number of things, that sort of variables that crept up. I just sort of knew that it would be interesting to work with him because of his sense of planning and his interest in sequences and series of forms. I think those things tend to assert themselves more organically for me, and in a lot of ways I had this, really an intuition more than anything else, that there would be something interesting about comparing those two sensibilities. So that was sort of where the impetus to show together came from.
So the title came...
So the title, we might as well face that, huh? Okay, part of the impetus for the title actually is one of the things we talk about a lot. Tyler and I meet pretty often. One of the things we talk about a lot is the studio space as a kind of, as an idea, as a sensibility, or something that affects your sensibility. And sometimes too, for art, it's kind of a talisman to hang on to as an idea. And we both have 3 children. We both have to sort of negotiate with domestic space in order to make work. And there's a domestic quality in both of our works, one way or the other. I mean, in his case, I think it's interesting, like the interface between a kind of minimalist process or aesthetic and then the cardboard, which is reminiscent of packing boxes or moving boxes or something like that. Something about the idea of storage was really beginning to interest me, because I find that when I work, memory is a big part of how I come up with ideas and how material ideas happen for me. Often it's a kind of confirmation that an idea is on track is when certain memories come to the fore in the process of working. And I was interested in drawing a line between storage and storage space and material storage, and the idea of kind of an underground situation, in this case this basement of this house where I work, and this, kind of unconscious memory process kind of experience, and particularly rooted to the feeling of houses and the material of houses as representing sort of an unconscious of the house. In my case, it's very personal. My parents passed away about 18 or 20 years ago, and I still live with a lot of materials, a lot of their things and possessions and objects. One of the walls of my studio is a bookcase that has the remains of my father's library, which is greatly reduced now. So something about working around those materials is, I think, inevitably part of the experience of what happens with my work. So that was where partly the idea of storage came from, memory storage, the idea of storage space. And I think we have a different view of storage now in a digital context than we might have had quite a long time ago, a more elastic, physical kind of memory. Now we tend to quantify memory more. There's a certain illusionary quality to the way we quantify memory, an unreal quality. And I'm interested in the distance traveled, if you like, between that unreal quality and the very real facts of painting or sculpting. So just to address your question, it's a really good one about my choice of materials. Or choice should be in quotations here. The materials that sort of happen in the work, they're typically kind of domestic materials, and there is a link for that to me. It's a personal link. It's not necessarily something that's available to, I think, others. Which was just that my mother was an etcher and slept in the room with her press, and we had a kiln in the basement, and there was a lot of art materials in our home. Actually, my father had lined the walls with shelves, and stuffed into the shelves over time were books and art materials, papers, pens. I think when he died, we cleared through the space and we found, 4 geometry sets and 6 sets of school supplies and all of these things that have kind of been very densely filled into these wall spaces. And there was something really interesting about this kind of hutch existence that we were living in. That is something I know is important to, I guess, the whole way I think about creativity, period. that the walls of the house were just full of material. And for my own domestic situation, it's a very inescapable part of my work and things I write and just about everything. And so the passage through the home of material is something that does interest me, the comings and goings of material, the days and nights of material. I was in the same home for 26 years, and there's something about watching change occur, the sort of changes of set and everything, that become quite meaningful over time in terms of a sense of continuity, and particularly the creative continuity. I really like the idea of the home as the studio. To a certain extent, I used to get sick a lot, you know, kind of invalid aesthetic of working from the home, working from the bed, working from a little isolated zone, and so that was probably part of things. Now, to get more current, certainly recyclable materials, you know, papers, a lot of brown paper, there's kind of inescapability to the green dialogue at the moment, and so, you know, paper bags are now normal rather than plastic bags, so there are a lot of these materials passing through, and it becomes very easy to kind of collect them. I mean, they pass through. I couldn't possibly even try to collect them. If that became the focus of the project, I would be really overwhelmed. I regularly have to destroy or throw out piles of material, and sweeping out the studio is always like unclogging a drain or something. There's these masses of paper that build up, and they, you know, after a while, it just falls out of use. You can't really use it anymore. But brown paper has always sort of had a special charm for me, and paper mache. My folks have been set designers. They built stage sets for high school theatricals, particularly I remember Camelot. So there were bits of trees, shields, helmets, and everything was made out of paper. And we lived that way when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and it was a very important time for me. It's a very important age, creatively. So the feeling that you could kind of make things out of paper is very important, the bricolage sensibility. And as well, certainly having a family and being in the arts, I kind of struggle sometimes with wondering if your lifestyle is sustainable, whether your lifestyle is going to hold up and work. And the ingenuity of having to invent. I mean, there's probably about $20 worth of materials in that room. You know, most of it was found, most of it was lent, most of it was given, and it's not a criteria for me. And to be quite honest, it isn't something I feel I load into the work. But it's always easier to work with the happenstance of things which are generously passed your way, including things that occupy a zone that's very important to me between waste and use value. I think that's where so many artists in the end operate. And there's a kind of static character that things take on when they pass out of use and before they pass into waste. And this is where I can work. And you really can't work once they become waste without creating this kind of spectacle of waste. But at the same time, when they fully have another use, repurposing them feels sometimes a bit too violent in intervention. So you want this area where things are floating, this kind of semi-limbo of things that are left on people's lawns and all these kinds of things that are semi-reconstituted. So this is important. It's just in terms of what makes it easy to work. You know, that's in the end, conceptually there are outcomes, but I'm always looking for flow and ease and connections.